I, like a lot of other people, was skeptical about the Milwaukee Bucks offseason. I didn't love the lack of additions overall. I thought they made some decent marginal additions. Torian Prince, DeLon Wright, some guys like that who are contributors. And yes, Chris Middleton hasn't played yet this season. But I don't love what I've seen so far. I don't love the coaching. I honestly am worried about the chemistry and the cohesiveness of the stars. And I'm also I think their depth is atrocious. And so I think there are significant issues that this team is going to have to address because they're in a situation now where a bad year means Giannis asks out and isn't a Buck anymore. That's just the likely outcome at this point. I think he's talked about it somewhat openly this season, talking about, well, we'll see what happens. If they keep me, great. But like he doesn't know. He's like, one of the logical things he said was that he would be traded. He said that. My guess is he asks out of Milwaukee this offseason if they have a disastrous season, which makes this year incredibly important at the start that they've had. Terrifying if you are a Milwaukee Bucks fan. Before we hop in, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Help me push towards 1,000 subscribers. We're trying to get there, trying to get monetized on this channel. Really appreciate y'all's support and everybody hanging out. Without further ado, let's hop right into it. Number one, first thing I mentioned, I do not love the coaching. I think Darvin Ham and Doc Rivers are two of the, I guess, less creative, less quality coaches in the NBA right now. And that's not to say Doc Rivers wasn't once a good coach. I think he once was a pretty good coach, but he had incredible teams. And he has, for years now, honestly, choked a decent bit. Now, at the same time, I am not as low on Doc Rivers as some. I think he's a decent coach. I just don't think he's like the best coach in the world. And I think there are cohesiveness issues there as well. And potentially just issues, I think, overall. And I don't like bringing on Darvin Ham. I don't know what he adds, in all honesty, onto the coaching staff. And again, that's just my perspective, but those two guys leading your franchise isn't like, it's not the worst thing you've ever seen, right? But I just think that they are potentially outmatched a little bit by some of the other coaching at the top. I'm a big Kenny Atkinson guy. I think Joe Mazzulla has proven himself as a really good head coach. Tibbs, we know he's a great coach. Like, I think it's going to be fascinating in the playoffs how the Bucks compete is first things first. So coaching is a question. Second, though, and I think even more important than some of the coaching stuff, is the cohesiveness of the two stars. The fact that Giannis and Dame said that they did not work out together a single time this entire offseason is kind of mind-boggling to me. The whole point of bringing in Damian Lillard was, number one, to help Dame try to win a championship and give yourself the best chance to compete for a title. And the whole argument at the time was that Dame and Giannis were a perfect fit, and it was just going to work out exquisitely. It's going to be beautiful basketball. And we did see that at points this past year. And honestly, even today against the Cavs, or yesterday as y'all watched this video, that was the best they've looked this year, the two of them. And I think without Dame heroics in the fourth quarter, they're not even in that game. Like, they had really, that's kind of part of the scary part, is their two stars both played great and they still lost. And shout out to Donovan Mitchell for the game winner. But I'm worried about the cohesiveness of their two stars. I'm not sure they're really friends. I'm not sure those dudes are like best buds. I think they're probably more so coworkers than anything else, which isn't inherently a terrible thing. But the fact that they didn't work out at all, didn't build that cohesiveness over the summer, is worrisome. Dame has not been super consistent. I mean, we were 1 for 10 last week. He's had some down moments, certainly last season and this season as well. Just a couple of slow games to start the season. A couple of big games, including obviously last night against the Cavs was phenomenal. But outside of that, it hasn't been the most consistent and strong start for Damian Lillard overall, I wouldn't say. And Giannis honestly hasn't been quite the same either, I feel like. As crazy as that is to say, because Giannis is still doing his absolute thing. Had 34, 16, and 9 today, like very typical Giannis stat line. It's crazy to say that I don't feel like he's 100% been himself and he's averaging 30, 11, and 6. So it's a harsh take. He's still freaking Giannis. He's still a top 3 basketball player in the world. The dude is incredible. But there have been moments where I've been a little effort wondering to a certain extent, which is crazy that his stats are still this good. But again, I think he wants out if things go poorly. I think he really does. The last couple of years have been a big question mark. And that leads to the biggest issue with this team, which is the depth, or honestly, the lack thereof. And Chris Middleton, when fully healthy, is still a good NBA player. We saw that in the playoffs last year. The problem is we don't get that Chris Middleton nearly enough to really effectively judge what the Bucks can be with him. And there are injury concerns with Dame. Honestly, there are some injury concerns at this point with Giannis. Not that he's getting old, but he's had a couple injuries last couple of years. Was injured in the playoffs last year, and the Bucks just did not have a chance to compete. So they need their stars healthy. They need all three of them healthy, and the depth outside of those three is just like Brook Lopez is continuing to get older, and in my opinion, continuing to play worse. Just have not loved at all what I've seen out of him offensively this season. He's not the same rebounder he once was. Efficiency-wise, it's been down across the board to start the year. It's not what you're looking for out of your veteran big, but at this point, he is kind of older. Can you blame him? Not exactly. Pat Connaughton is not the role player that he was a couple years ago. I don't know why. I don't know what's happened, but he just quite simply is not the same player as he was a couple years ago. So he's a guy who's like, he's playing the lowest minutes he's played since I don't know, before he was on the Bucks, I think probably. And honestly, outside of that, Taurean Prince has been decent. He was really good against the Cavs, but overall, I wouldn't say he's like a guy that you really count on and expect to be a consistent third or fourth option. He's been okay, shooting the three ball pretty well, but overall, it's just still concerning, is my thought. Gary Trent has shot terrible multiple games this season. Another guy who was a big offseason addition, and I think has actually helped their defense a little bit, and yet I'm still truly concerned about this squad as a whole because his shooting has just been really bad, and he's got to shoot the ball well. They need quality spacing and quality spacers. Bobby Portis is continuing to get older. Honestly, I think if you asked Bucks fans their opinion on Bobby Portis, they'd go, I absolutely love that guy, but his play can be inconsistent. He was a minus 16 today. He's not particularly impactful on the defensive end of the court. His shooting can be a little bit hit or miss. He's just another guy where it's like, I liked DeLon Wright on a minimum, but he's not a game-changing player. You know what I mean? And that's another guy where he's got a big role, and they're asking him, or not a huge role, but he's got a decent role off the bench. They're asking him to contribute, and he can contribute on certain nights, but I think offensively, it can be a little bit of a challenge. And then the other guys, like Andre Jackson, Marjon Beauchamp, Chris Livingston, et cetera, are just guys who it's almost like there's almost no real point to them, I guess, at this point. Like, they're not contributors at a high level. And so you're in a tough spot relying on those types of guys to lead your basketball team. And I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't think the Bucks are like horrible. I think they're decent. I just think there is more improvement that can be made for this roster. They're just not playing to their potential. And honestly, the depth-wise is not super high potential, but their stars need to consistently play to their potential. The coaching needs to prove to be consistently good, because ever since they fired Adrian Griffin last year, they were 30-10. They fired him. They've been a 500 team since. Like this, it's just a concerning trend over the past really almost full season at this point with the Bucks. And so they've started the season really bad. They're 1-5. It's going to be an interesting year. That's not how you want to start this season, and I don't think they're going to be in a good spot if they're not a top 4 seed in the East. If their guys get hurt, this could go south quickly. If somebody were to get like hurt, like if Damian Lillard were to get hurt this week and things go sideways with the Bucks and they end up going into freaking the All-Star break or the trade deadline, the trade deadline approaches and they're 10 games under 500, we might actually start to hear Giannis conversations, like legitimately, which I don't think that's going to happen, but they're one injury away to Giannis or Damian Lillard where that looks like a very, very real possibility because the rest of the roster is just not elite. If I was a Bucks fan, I'd be worried, man, because the Cavs look awesome. The Knicks are getting their mojo back. The Celtics are the Celtics. Magic are now facing injury issues, but they've been okay. The Pacers are pretty good. There's a couple of other decent teams in the East. Philly's going to get healthy at some point, hopefully. It becomes a little scary for the Bucks in terms of the top of the East if they can't get their ship righted quickly. And so that's going to be a fascinating storyline to follow. Hope y'all did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. I'll be back with more 2K content very, very soon. And I said 2K. NBA content very, very soon. I appreciate y'all. Peace.